In this, our third installment of Biblical Foundations of Church Music Ministry, we want to take a look at the concept consecration. Consecration is the act of setting anything or anyone apart exclusively for service to God. Consecration is also referred to in Scripture as being set apart, being sanctified, ceremonially clean, purified, and anointed. If we look in the Scriptures, we will see that consecration takes on various forms. For instance, in Exodus chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, God consecrates the entire nation of Israel. He says, "Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." In Exodus chapter 13, verse 1, God consecrates the firstborn of both man and animal. He says, "Consecrate to me every firstborn male." The first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belonged to me, whether human or animal. In Judges chapter 6 and 7, we see where God consecrates for a specific assignment. Gideon is a perfect example of this. The Israelites are being oppressed, extremely oppressed by the Midianites, and Israel begins to cry out to God. God selects and anoints Gideon to take Israel into battle. And of course, as the story goes, they were victorious. Listen to what God says to Gideon. He says, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Another example can be found in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 11, where we see Hannah, the wife of Elkanah. She makes a vow to give her unborn son back to God. She says this, "Lord Almighty, if you would only look upon your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant and give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." Then we have Jeremiah. God says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." So here we have two examples of consecration before conception. So the Scripture shows us various forms of consecration. And we should take some time in our own private study time to look at these examples, as well as there are several others in Scripture. Another example of consecration will be the personal vow, one that we take and we say to God what it is we are committed to, what we are going to commit ourselves to. And our personal vows should not be taken lightly. In your study time, look at Acts chapter 5, the story of Ananias and Sapphira, who made a vow along with the rest of the church to share everything that they had with one another so that there would not be a need. And of course, they broke that vow, and the story did not turn out too well for them. You need to read that story in Acts chapter 5. And I say that to say, once again, that when we make a vow, it should not be taken lightly. Listen to the writer of Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Verses 2 through 6. He writes, "Do not be quick with your mouth, and do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven, and you are on earth, so let your words be few. As a dream comes when there are many cares, so the speech of a fool when there are many words. When you make a vow to God, do not delay in fulfilling it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin. Do not protest to the temple messenger my vow was a mistake. When we commit to a ministry, it is important that we follow through on that commitment. Commitment is voluntary. Commitment is also intentional. There is no such thing as being kind of committed. That's like a wife saying to her husband, honey, I think I'm kind of pregnant. There's no such thing. The important thing is for church leaders to hear, and to hear clearly, that there is no such thing as part-time commitment to ministry. You either are committed or you aren't. Leadership is not part-time. The last point I want to make regarding consecration is that consecration makes us accountable. Now, accountability helps us to maintain perspective on our primary purpose, which is service. And it helps us to keep perspective on our place under God. It keeps us from thinking too highly of ourselves. Richard Foster, in his book, The Celebration of Discipline, writes this. He says, service enables us to say no to the world's games of promotion and authority. It abolishes our need and our desire for a pecking order. One of the last examples that Jesus left for the church involved a basin and a towel. In that example, he redefines for us what it means to be set apart, to be a consecrated servant, to be a consecrated leader. Consecration does not come with a spotlight, and it does not come with applause. Service is more often than not done in hiddenness. I'm Eli Wilson Jr. Be blessed.